Have you ever been to Mongolia and learned about their culture and values? Mongolian culture is very diverse and presents a lot of values which are unique to their own country, as well as people who follow these practices. Though the ideas of the historical contribution, culture, and conflict, we see how Mongolia is formed and how these three things help to shape their community.
The Mongol Empire, in many ways, marked a crossroad in world history. As the largest contiguous empire in history, it united Eurasia in a fashion that has not been repeated. As such, actions within the empire rippled across the rest of Asia and Europe, whether through trade, warfare, or religious affairs. Furthermore, as the Mongols ended several previous dynasties and led to the creation of new power centers, the Mongol Empire may be viewed as a catalyst for change from the pre-modern era to the modern era.
Mongolia has a long and dominant history of nomadic pastoralism, raising livestock such as yaks, camels, sheep, and more recently, cows. Today, more than 1.5 million people, half Mongolia's total population, live in the capital, Ulaanbaatar. Many herders and nomads move to the city for economic reasons and settle in Gur districts.
The Mongolian cuisine is much influenced by the continental climate that dominates the region and also a bit by the Russian and Chinese cultures. Meat and dairy form the staple diet of this nomadic cuisine, with the use of vegetables being limited. The meat of horse, yak, beef, lamb is consumed as delicacies. Milk from cattle, camels, horses, yaks, goats, and sheep is an important part of the Mongolian diet. Suyute sai, perched here on the stove inside a family's gur, is a traditional drink made from equal parts water and milk. A tablespoon of green tea, teaspoons of salt. Drunk as part of Mongolian custom and culture, the tea is linked to high blood pressure.
Traditionally, Mongols practiced shamanism, worshipping the blue sky. As part of their shamanistic heritage, the people practiced ritualistic magic, nature worship, exorcism, mediation, and natural healing. However, Tibetan Buddhism, also called Vajrayana Buddhism, gained more popularity after it was introduced in the 16th century. Tibetan Buddhism shared the common Buddhist goal of individual release from suffering and reincarnation. Communists led an anti-religious campaign in the 1930s, which nearly destroyed the extensive system of monasteries. Under communistic rule, atheism was promoted and monasteries were closed, although shamanistic practices survived. From 1945 to 1990, only one monastery, Gandan in Ulaanbaatar, was allowed to operate. Democratic reform that started in 1990 allowed freedom of religion. Well over 100 monasteries have reopened, and Kazakh Muslims are allowed to practice Islam. Many young people are receiving an education through these traditional centers of learning, and the people are once again able to practice cherished traditions. There's a significant minority of Sunni Muslims in the far western regions of Mongolia, most of whom are ethnic Kazakhs.
Mongolians, unlike the settled agriculturalists to the south, have never valued complex extended families, and in the 1980s, most lived in nuclear families composed of a married couple, their children, and perhaps a widowed parent. Among traditional herders, each occupied its own tent, and sons usually received their share of the family herd at the time of their marriage. The usual pattern was for one son, often, but not necessarily, the youngest to inherit the headship of the parental herd and tent, while other sons formed new families with equivalent shares of the family herd. Daughters married out to their other families.
On Mongolia New Year's Eve, there are a number of rituals that Mongolians perform in order to bring good luck for the year to come. First, houses must be cleaned out thoroughly, which is often a day-long task. Candles are lit to symbolize enlightenment and to give light to any spirits who have become Buddhas and that might visit. 3 chunks of ice are also left just outside the door, since the horses of Paldam Lamo, a Buddhist god, visits every home on New Year's Eve, and will be thirsty. Finally, a family dinner is enjoyed in the evening. Card games are played in the hopes of beginning a year-long good luck streak. Debts are paid off, and grudges are forgiven. On Lunar New Year's itself, people visit their relatives, beginning with their parents and continuing in order of descending age. They make many short visits to dozens of relatives. Each time, special rituals are followed. The guest must ask the hostess, "Are you living in peace?" The hostess kisses the guest's cheek, gives out a gift of money or vodka, and serves tea mixed with milk. Gifts may also be exchanged. And Nadam in Mongolian means games, which makes sense since the holiday is primarily centered on 3 Mongolian pastimes: wrestling, horse racing, and archery. Nadam is sometimes called Erin Gorvan Nadam, meaning 3 games of men. In recent times, however, women have also participated in horse racing and archery, though not yet in wrestling. Nadam has its origins in the distant past when Mongolia was ruled by warlords and emperors like Genghis Khan and his ancestors. Their armies, hunting tournaments and parades, nomadic wedding celebrations, and sporting competitions all fed into what later officially became Nadam. The holiday took on a more patriotic aura when it was chosen to celebrate the 1921 revolution that freed Mongolia from Chinese control. While Nadam was a Buddhist and shamanist religious element to it, it has become more secularly celebrated since the 1930s when communist influence from the Soviet Union prevailed.
Do you guys ride horses? Yes and no. As Paul mentioned, anyone who has the means to travel or study abroad would usually come from a household that is more modern. However, nomads still make a large portion of Mongolian population, so it is not uncommon for us to have relatives who do ride horses and choose a simpler lifestyle. Well, do you guys speak Chinese or are you part of China? No. Modern-day Mongolia has been a sovereign nation for the past 92 years. A more historical, accurate way of putting it is that Mongolia was a colony of Manchuria, or Qing dynasty, for around 300 years, though people mostly just label it as China. However, Inner Mongolia is part of China, but I would say they keep some of our old traditions even better than us modern Mongolians do in certain aspects, such as using the traditional script. Do you live in a yurt? Same as question 1. Depends on who you talk to. Middle-class people mostly live in apartments, and people not as fortunate or nomads live in gurs.
It's not difficult to spot signs of anti-Chinese sentiment, even in modern-day Ulaanbaatar. Graffiti calling for the removal of the Chinese sprinkle urban settings. Urban legends about poisoned Chinese goods drum up paranoia, and locals insistent on enforcing social norms that maintain the purity of Mongol blood. Excoriate Mongol women who become intimate with Chinese men. One rapper, Gi, has become popular in the capital performing songs featuring anti-Chinese slurs and calls to stand up for the Mongolian national identity. Extremist neo-Nazi groups like Sagan Kas and Dire Mongol place their main targets on the Chinese and are still active as of this year. The Chinese are not oblivious to the Mongol stance. Questions like, "How do Mongolians see China?" or "Why do Mongolians hate China?" circulate the Chinese blogosphere and spark critical reflection of the Chinese exacerbation of the relationship. But given Mongolia's relatively much weaker geopolitical pull and historical positioning, Anti-Mongol sentiments in China is not nearly as pronounced in the few areas where it exists.
Between the summer of 1999 and early 2002, an unprecedented series of meteorological disasters took place. Great swaths of Mongolia were hit by drought and by different types of zood, winter phenomena that prevent animals feeding either because of ice crust or heavy snow. This has led many dismiss pastoralism as a backward pursuit and embarrassment to notions of modernization rather than a proven response to a harsh environment. The governor of Dornod, the easternmost province, says that herders get in the way of his ambitious plans for resource extraction. Not just mining, but also inviting Chinese agriculturalists to farm great swaths of steppe. The second response, more sympathetic to herding, but as disturbing in its potential consequences, is promoted by, among others, the Asian Development Bank. This argues that market reforms cannot work without the private ownership of land. Who can argue with that? Without ownership, herders have no incentive to protect land from degradation and to invest in land improvements. The theory of the tragedy of the commons is well known. It is in the interest of any individual to add to his stock of animals on common, even if that leads to further degradation.
The culture of Mongolia has thrived in the last years and continues to prosper today. All of the points presented in this have shown how the historical contribution, culture, and conflict have helped to mold the uniqueness of this country.